Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be doing a deep dive into Jing Yuan's best light cones and gearing options, and by popular demand we're going to be focusing specifically on Eidolon Zero and covering all his free-to-play options which are best, as well as the battle pass, and of course we'll also touch on his signature, but a big focus on making sure everyone knows exactly what they're going to want to build for their Jing. Alright, so the first big call that you guys are going to want to make for your Jing Yuan is going to be whether or not you want to build him attack or you want to build him speed. So the TLDR is that speed is probably going to win out a little bit in the endgame in terms of raw damage over a 8-cycle fight. And I'm going to flash up a chart here so that you guys can see the difference. Now, it's not so much of a difference, it's going to be a big deal. If you wanted to go attack, absolutely fine. You know, in terms of raw sheet damage, attack is pretty damn close, man, and it also affords you some pretty good options, which we'll get into here in a second. The speed is likely going to edge it out in a spreadsheet kind of situation, which is what these numbers are based on. If you're interested in that sheet, you can find it down below. So speed, looking pretty good, but attack here, very close. But there are some pros and cons to both of them. So if you decide to build your Jing speed, you're going to be getting a little bit more of a smoother rotation in terms of your Lightning Lord, and you're also going to be getting a little bit more opportunity to move, interact with the enemy, and getting a little bit more break on terms of breaking lightning enemies. However, with attack, you're going to be consuming less skill points overall in your rotation, affording your Jing more opportunities to allow supports to support him more effectively, as well as your healer and your tank and stuff like that to use their skills. You can either go with more damage, a more selfish build for Jing, or you can go with a more team-focused build, which is attack, which allows your team to do some more things. The choice is yours. Speed will edge it out a little bit in terms of damage. Now, I decided to go ahead and put these spreadsheet numbers that I'm showing you guys to the test though. It'd be no good just doing the numbers. How does it play out in reality in game? So I decided to compare two builds. I had a build which built attack with Jing, which had 101 speed, and I had a build which had speed, which built 131 speed, and I decided to take Jing Yuan into Memory of Chaos 6 and do the first side 6 times in total, so 3 runs for each build. So the results were as follows. With the 101 speed build, the first attempt was 10 cycles long. It took 10 cycles to clear side 1. The next attempt was 11 cycles, and the next attempt after that was 9 cycles. Now overall, there's probably going to be some variance in there at how I played, how the fight played out, and all sorts of stuff like that, so this is definitely not definitive. But it was 10, 11, and 9. Now when I took the speed build in there though, the results were pretty interesting. So it had 131 speed. The results were 9 cycles, and then 8 cycles. So you can see that the speed build definitely had something going for it, at least in that specific fight. Definitely don't take this as gospel, but speed definitely seemed to edge out attack quite substantially in Memory of Chaos. I have no idea why that is, but those were the results I was getting, and I was playing him with the exact same team. The only thing that was different was his gear, speed versus attack, and that was a pretty big difference. So that's going to be a little bit of info for you guys there. In terms of exact breakdowns on your stats, if you're going for the speed build, aim for 130 to 140 speed. That's the golden zone, I reckon, at least based on my experience, and I would say an exact number would be 134. If you're playing attack, pick up a few speed subsets here and there to reach 100 so that you get to move every cycle. That's a pretty big deal, but after that, probably don't want any more speed after that. So 100 speed if you're playing attack, 134 speed if you're playing speed is, I think, some reasonable guidelines to start out with. Now, the next decision to make for your Jing Yuan after you decide on your build is going to be the sets that you want to use him with. And okay, let's get to the big elephant in the room, and that is the planar ornament sets. So if you're playing the attack-based build, you actually only have one good option, and that is the Inert Salsatto. The Space Sealing Station only really works if you are playing speed, which, you know, you need 120 speed. Otherwise, it's going to tank in value and not be very good. But, you know, if you're playing attack, you're going to be looking at the Inert Salsatto. It's fantastic for him. It's got crit, which he definitely wants, especially early, and it also gives him some increased damage to his follow-up attacks, which, unlike other characters, Jing Yuan can take full advantages of, because a big amount of his damage is from the ultimate and from his follow-up attacks, which is just great. Now, if you're playing the speed version, you can choose between Space Sealing Station and Inert Salsatto, as you do have the speed required to activate it. And with that chart, we'll just flash it up again here. You can see that they're very close. You can see that the speed with his signature and E0 is very close. They're basically identical, so they are interchangeable, at least with the gear configuration that I have in my calculations here. So you can be pretty happy with going either one or the other if you are playing the speed build. So TLDR, Space Sealing or Salsatto, they're equal for speed, and Salsatto for attack. Alright, so if you're looking for exact gear breakdowns like stats, substats, and sets, that's going to be contained in my ultimate guide coming up in terms of what is recommended. But now I want to dive into the light cones and which light cones are best for him, the rankings, the damage, and how it all works out. So it goes without saying, his best in slot is going to be Before the Dawn, and you know, getting higher superimposition levels is just going to be better. It is what it is, We're not going to focus on that. We all know that's the best one. You know, it's go for it if you can go for it. If you want to go for it, that is what it is. But what I do want to focus on is the other options and how close they are to before dawn, because we obviously know that is the thing to beat. Now, before we get started, we need to understand where Jing Yuan's damage comes from. So on single target, Jing Yuan, I'm going to flash up a chart here, gets pretty much all of his damage from the Lightning Lord. You can see here that 74.3% of his damage is from the Lightning Lord, and he's also got a bit from his ultimate as well as his skill. Now, what's interesting though is we want to compare that over to how much damage he deals with each of them in AoE. So you can see here in 3 target AoE, the Lightning Lord deals 56.2% of his damage, the skill deals 27.4, and the ultimate deals 16.5. Now, why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant because some light cones specifically state that they affect certain things, like the Birth of the Self, for example, grants increased follow-up damage, which means it's going to be really, really strong in single target, because most of Jing's damage in single target is from the Lightning Lord. But it becomes a little bit less effective comparatively on AoE, because some of the damage now is not coming from the Lightning Lord, it's coming from the skill and the ultimate. And that is going to play into which light cone you might want to go for. Do you want your Jing to be built for AoE, or do you want your Jing to be built for single target? Alright, so to get started, let's discuss a few of the light cones which we can kind of knock out of the running because they just don't synergize that well with Jing specifically. So the 3-star light cones right now I'm going to knock out, as I don't think any of these really provide any unique benefit to Jing, which is going to tip him over the edge versus some of the 4-star free-to-play options like Serious of Breakfast, which pretty much everyone gains access to after you complete the story. So we're going to knock out all of those. The next one I'm going to knock out is Make the World Clamor, because it really does buff up ultimates, which can be strong, but Jing Yuan doesn't really get much damage from his ultimate. It's all from the follow-up attacks, and the energy is only at the start of the fight, so we're not going to get too much benefit from that over a longer fight in endgame. So we're going to knock that one out as well. The last one we're going to knock out is going to be Genius's Repose, as it does provide some pretty good stats, and it does have a really cool on-kill effect, but overall it's not going to match up, and it is also from the gacha, so it's not something that we kind of want to be focusing on here in terms of exactly what we're looking for when compared to another similar gacha light cone, which offers an absolutely massive amount of follow-up damage, which Jing Yuan actually really is interested in. But just note, this mon isn't bad, definitely not a bad runner, especially if you're getting some kills. So what are we going to focus on then? Well, we're going to be focusing on the Battle Pass light cone at Superimposition 1, as well as talking about its potential later on, and we're also going to be focusing on the Birth of the Self, as it is going to buff follow-up attack damage. Of course, the big one, Seriousness of Breakfast, how good is it? It's the free-to-play light cone, everyone gets access to a lot of copies of it, and then finally we'll be talking about Night on the Milky Way and how they all stack up against his signature. Alright, to start us off here, today is another peaceful day, features massive base damage, and even at Superimposition 1 features a pretty big damage bonus, and is going to grant Jing roughly 26% increased damage, which is a big deal for his kit. Now, it's worth noting that the Today is Another Peaceful Day light cone is generic, meaning it'll affect him equally in AoE and single target, meaning it's going to be a good option for both scenarios for Jing, which is a good thing there. The next up is the Birth of the Self, which is going to grant a ton of follow-up damage here. Now, it is a gacha light cone, so you may or may not have it, and you may or may have different superimposition levels of what we've got going on here. I, for example, have pulled quite a lot, and I don't even have a single copy of it, so it's definitely not one everyone will have. So the question is going to be, how good is it? Well, it's going to be specifically good for his single target capability, but its base attack actually is lower than the Battle Pass light cone we just reviewed, so it definitely does have a few downsides to it, but it might be one you might want to consider using if you have a super high imposition level of it, if you're in the future, or if you got lucky on your pull. So it's definitely not bad, and will double its effect basically when the enemy is below 50% HP. The next contender is going to be the big one, the free-to-play option here, which is the Seriousness of Breakfast, which has a ton of value. Its base stats are about as good as the gacha option, but a little bit worse than the Battle Pass option, but it does give you increased damage, which again is going to be fantastic for Jing because it's good in AoE and single target. It buffs him across the board, but it also grants you a buff here, which sets up to 3 times every time you kill an enemy. Now, you can basically assume this is going to be active for the biggest and hardest portions of Memory of Chaos fights, because you clear out a full wave of enemies at the start of every Memory of Chaos, and Jing is going to fully stack that up easily and have that for the later waves. So you can essentially treat this as a 24% increased damage and 24% increased attack at max superimposition levels, which everyone can get free to play just by playing the game very, very easily. So this is a fantastic option. And lastly, we will quickly touch on Himiko's light cone. So Himiko's light cone here at superimposition 1, which most people are going to have it at, features pretty high a base attack, which is pretty much its main selling point, but it will also feature, okay stats here. It gives 9% attack here, for one enemy, so that's the worst it's going to be. You know, it's definitely already behind in terms of the stats that it gives in terms of other comparisons we've just made, but you know, it does stack up to 5 times here. So if you have 5 enemies, you're going to be getting a ton of attack, but how often is that actually going to happen? Generally with Jing on the field, he's going to use one skill and his Lightning Lord is going to obliterate most of the enemies on the field, and you're going to be left with one big chunky one. There's very rarely ever 5 enemies which are going to survive 1 or 2 turns from Jing anyway, so when you actually really need the damage, this light cone actually falls a little bit short, unfortunately. So I think that overall Knight of the Milky Way has a really strong niche, can be pretty strong, but I don't think it's going to stack up, so I'm going to actually exclude it from our review here as well, because I actually believe that I'd prefer to use the seriousness of breakfast in the endgame content right now as opposed to Knight on the Milky Way. Alright, conclusion time. So I'm going to flash up a chart here. This is everything we've talked about here at superimposition 1 and 5 for single target at Eidolon 0, of course. And we can see how things stack up here. So it's no surprise, Before the Dawn at superimposition 5 and 1 pretty much beats out the entire composition. You know, it is what it is. We expected it and it is what it is. But how much better is it than the next best option? So you can see here in the 3rd place is going to be the superimposition 5 of the Battle Pass light cone. And it actually isn't too far behind. It's about 10% behind the signature here. You know, obviously superimposition 5, that's not easy to get, but it is something that you could choose to invest in for the long term for your erudition characters. So that is definitely an option on the table for you guys if you are interested in that. Next up, we have superimposition 5 of Birth of the Self, which comes in at about, you know, what, 10 to 15% worse than the signature, which is, you know, definitely not bad, but it is going to be definitely a lot more on single target here, as the follow-up attacks definitely do get a little bit less powerful on the AoE scenario. So you're gonna have to consider that it will be a little bit weaker on AoE, but it definitely does have some pretty good single target, but you have to get lucky to get that superimposition 5. All right, next on to the big star of the show here, the seriousness of breakfast. If you have the 3 attack buffs stacked, you can see here that it's actually, you know, okay, it's not bad. It's at 275k here versus the 334k of the signature. So it is about 20% worse, but you are saving all those pulls. That's basically another whole character, another 5-star character that you can get versus that. So it is a 20% damage loss, you know, but it is going to be pretty damn good if you can get to superimposition 5 of the free-to-play light cone. I think it's actually a pretty big option, and it is actually a pretty good option. So next up, we have the lower superimposition levels here. So if you just have superimposition 1 of the Peaceful Daylight cone, it's actually a pretty good option as well. You know, definitely, you know, not on the highest side compared to the signature, but you know, we've got a pretty good option here, and it is definitely going to be the best of the superimposition ones of all of the light cones if you only have S1 of everything. But you know, if you have breakfast and it is this high superimposition level, okay, you know, you could invest more in Today's Another Peaceful Day to kind of beat out breakfast. In the long term, it's definitely going to do that, but in the short term, breakfast is looking pretty damn good in what we're looking at here. Next up, we have Birth of the Self, which is quite substantially behind Peaceful Day now, even at superimposition 1, and it's definitely got that downside of not being as strong in AoE as well. So it definitely looks like that Peaceful Day is definitely going to be Birth of the Self, unless you have a lot of superimposition levels here. Next, we have superimposition 5 breakfast, in the worst case scenario where you don't have any stacks of the attack buff, and you can see here that it actually is still pretty reasonably competitive. You know, it's not going to be breaking any damage charts here, but it definitely isn't bad either. So that is going to be a pretty big one there as well. Then finally, we have S1 breakfast, you know, which, you know, no one's going to have it at superimposition 1, but it's there for you guys to compare to. You know, you want to be getting the breakfast one if you're using it on Jing to superimposition 5 ASAP to make it a competitive option there. So TLDR, signature obviously is insane, but if you don't have the signature, the Battle Pass light cone at S1 is pretty damn good. But if you have breakfast at S5, well, that's actually looking pretty damn strong as well. But if you're insanely lucky, Birth of the Self can also be an option at high superimposition levels. Alright, to give you guys the full picture here, some final checks here. We've got his E0 in an AoE scenario. We've got the top contenders here. So we've got S5, you know, and 1 Before the Dawn for our benchmark. We've got S5 Peaceful Day, which is the Battle Pass cone if you fully invested in it. We've got the S5 Breakfast, which is fully stacked. That's our free-to-play front runner here. Very, very good. What everyone can get. And then we've got S5 Birth of the Self, the gacha follow-up attack one here. So you can see here something pretty interesting. That the Breakfast and Peaceful Day are, you know, not too close, but, you know, they're competitive. One of them you can get right now, and the other one you had to invest a lot of battle passes in. So it's definitely not bad. But you can see that the Breakfast, fully stacked, actually starts to beat out Birth of the Self because of the AoE versus follow-up attack discussion we had earlier here. So overall, the TLDR is such. Of course, his signature is insane, and it's going to be the front runner in pretty much every scenario, and, you know, higher superimposition levels will even just make it better. Peaceful Peaceful Day is good at S1, but it's not so good that it would beat out Breakfast at S5 if you can get your hands on that right now as a free-to-play player. But if you wanted to invest in the long term, Peaceful Day would actually be the best option if you could get it to Super in position 5. Now, Breakfast is going to be your next best option pretty much across the board. It even beats out both of itself if you want to do AoE. So overall, I think it's the one I would recommend. So grab that Breakfast light cone, invest in it as much as you can, and that is going to be your best free-to-play option for Jing Yuan there. But if you want to go long term, go for that Battle Pass light cone at S5. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. It's giving you guys a bit more information there, and it's giving you guys a breakdown of how you might want to consider and gearing up your Jing Yuan. Definitely look out for the ultimate guide coming up next. It's going to basically go over everything you need to know in detail definitively. And of course, if you liked the video, make sure to like it, calculations down below, subscribe for more, and until next time, hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Cheers.